Finished. It appears that the baths were not in use. It is built on an artificial terrace towards the sea, just outside the city walls, in a very theatrical position. To get to the baths, you have to walk a short way downhill. Put your audio guide on hold while you walk down to the area in front of the baths. Once you are there, press play. Some columns are still left of the arcaded terrace on which the baths were built. Stairs connected the terrace to a port canal that led to the sea. Let's go in through the porch hallway on the right and into the room in front of you. We thus come to the apoditorium, or dressing room. On the right, in the upper part of the wall, the painted decoration presents erotic scenes above the sections going from Roman numeral 1 to 16. We can observe a curious range of amorous positions and acts. One sequence involving two women is unique in Roman painting. Go out of this room and continue your tour in the next room. Right. This is the frigidarium, the room used for cold baths. The walls and vault have stucco decorations, and the panels around the pools show landscapes and seascapes. In the back, a waterfall cascaded from an imitation grotto above into the pool below. The fountain is decorated with a glass and shell mosaic representing Mars, the god of war, in flight alongside Cupids carrying his weapons. In the tympanum are the symbols of Jupiter, the father of the gods, an eagle, a globe, and a bolt of lightning. From the frigidarium, you go into the tepidarium, a transition room kept at a moderate temperature where bathers paused between their cold and hot baths. On the back wall is the door to the laconicum, which was a round room filled with hot, dry air. Finally, we come to the calidarium, the room for hot baths. The left side, shaped like an apse, has 3 panoramic windows looking out over the courtyard. In the area behind these rooms is a system of furnaces and heaters from which the hot air was channeled into the hollow space under the floor and between the walls of the heated rooms. Following the marked itinerary toward the exit, you will notice a large pool covered by a modern roof. This was the heated swimming pool, which was covered even in antiquity. Under the floor was a metal receptacle which could be reached along a service hall, in which a fire was lit for heating the water. If you would like information on the baths, press 104 and then play.
We are about to enter the city through one of the 7 gates piercing the city walls, more than 3 kilometers long, that protected Pompeii. Porta Marina was given this name in modern times because the road that went out of it led to the sea. has two arched openings linked together on the interior by a large barrel vault. Next to the gate, observe, on the left, the complex of the suburban baths. And on the right, a majestic residence, the so-called imperial villa. These rose on top of the walls because when Pompeii definitively became part of the Roman state, the walls lost their defensive function and consequently their importance diminished. If you would like information about the history of the city, press 101 and then play.
Und wir müssen ja da rum, darum stimmt es ja, dass wir da sind.
The House of Triptolemus is one of the most prestigious areas of Pompeii, opposite the Basilica and near to the Forum, the center of political and commercial life in the city. The house owes its name to the famous fresco in its triclinium, which shows Triptolemus, the hero who taught agriculture to humankind, as he receives a basket of wheat from the goddess.
This building was used for business transactions and the administration of justice. It was built in the second half of the 2nd century BC. The name derives from the Greek and means House of the King, because in the archaic age it was the king who administered justice. The term basilica was later adopted for Christian churches because they echoed its architectural form. Let's go into the central hall. This great space is divided lengthwise by large columns, which reached the height of about 11 meters, and was covered by a double-pitched roof. On the side walls are the remains of the painted decoration in the first style. The masonry was covered with stucco relief in the shape of squared blocks painted to imitate precious marble. At the end of the hall is a raised podium with a facade made up of 2 rows of columns. This was the tribunal, which the judges reached by going up some wooden steps. Its position, raised above the level of the floor, both indicated their hierarchical position and ensured the physical safety of the judges. If you would like to hear more about the first style of painting, press 1. built after the earthquake of 62 AD and faced with marble slabs, of which no trace remains. The first two on the left are from the same period, before 80 BC, and the one on the right is more recent. Let's start our visit with this one. If you wish, this was the headquarters of the city council, made up of about 100 men, called decurions, who held powers of deliberation and control over the sectors of public life. The niches in the walls, in all likelihood, held statues of emperors and political figures. Now, let's go toward the building in the middle. This building, which still has its elegant marble floor, is the tabularium. That is, the archives of the laws regulating Pompeian life. The third building was the headquarters of the magistrates of the city, who were the administrators. There were 4 of them, 2 called the Dwarvery Jure Disundo, who saw to justice and the economy, and 2 aediles, who were under them and were in charge of the maintenance of public works and surveillance of the markets and public order. To the left of the 3 buildings, in the corner on Via dell'Abbondanza, is the Comitium, an open hall for the convocation of the assembly of the citizens who had the right to vote. That is to say, free citizens of the male sex. Here, the magistrates were elected, and the deliberations of the city council were ratified. In this hall is a tribune, where the administrators sat as they presided over the assemblies and supervised the voting operations. If you would like further information on the public administration, press 106 and play. This large residence, which has over 60 rooms, is the result of combining 2 houses dated to the 3rd to 2nd century BC. The house's current aspect is subsequent to the 62 AD earthquake. On this occasion, the outer facade and walls of the house at street number 16 were redone. This part became the main section of the house and is the only part that can be visited today. The house at number 14 was destined to the servants' quarters and service areas. The house owes its name to the black and white mosaic floors which characterize it. From the entrance we go into the large atrium with an impluvium that was originally sheathed in marble. Around the atrium are the cubicula, or bedrooms. Let's look at the one next to the entrance, on the right. It has a floor of opus signinum, i.e. fragments of broken pottery or roof tiles mixed with lime mortar, punctuated with regular rows of white mosaic tiles, and decorated in the centre by a carpet of meanders alternating with squares. Let's go on to look at the cubiculum a little further on, also on the right. It has a splendid mosaic in the shape of a 12-petaled rosette, inscribed in a circle.
Palestra of the Juvenes is on the Vicolo della Regina, and in the entrance corridor is a lovely mosaic depicting two bare-handed athletes fighting. On the opposite wall, there are frescoes of athletes, wrestlers, a jumper with dumbbells, and a competition judge, the Ludi Magister, holding a sash to present to the winner. This large room was part of a men's baths dating back to the 1st century CE and located in a panoramic area of the city with stunning views of the sea. A total of 3 kilograms of silver items were found in the area around the furnace that warmed the baths. These items are now kept at the Museum of Archaeology in Naples, together with 2 wax tablets wrapped in cloth that tell us of the trading of 2 slaves. House of the Wild Boar, or House of Ancient Hunting, a large dwelling on Via dell'Abbondanza. The name of the house comes from the elegant mosaic decorating the entrance to the house, which shows a wild boar being attacked by dogs. This theme is a common one in other houses in Pompeii.
Vale, esta es diferente.
Yeah.
Which somehow this is not.
Yeah.
We're at that part of the tour. Oh, yeah.
A monumental entrance with Ionic columns leads into the triangular town square. After walking through the door, we come to the large three-sided colonnade that marks off the sacred area. In the back, you can see the remains of a temple. On the left, some of the columns of the arcade have been put back together. On the right is the basin of a fountain and a base that, as the inscription tells us, once held the statue of Marcellus, nephew of Augustus. A low wall behind this marks off a broad corridor. Perhaps this was a track for foot and horse races, held during the religious festivities. The square was inserted. Now let's go into the Great Theatre. The theatre is placed in direct contact with the triangular forum, the important religious centre with the Doric temple. Even though by this point the religious value of the theatrical performances was gone, the custom was maintained of building these structures near the temples, respecting tradition. This theatre was built in the 2nd century BC, but only after numerous renovations and restorations did it take on the aspect it has today. Its construction took advantage of the natural slope of the terrain to create the space for the tiers of seats, called the cavea, shaped like a horseshoe and divided into 3 zones. From the bottom towards the top, we have the imma cavea, sheathed in marble, the media cavea, and the summa cavea. This last is only partially preserved on the western side, facing the entrance. We can still see in the last zone of the masonry structure some stone blocks with holes in them that served to hold the framework of wooden poles over which large awnings were spread to shade the spectators. The seats on the first 4 tiers, were reserved for the decurions, members of the local senate who had special chairs called Isellia. In the first rows of the middle section, the media cavea, sat the representatives of the corporations, and then, in the summa cavea, were the common people. The theatre could hold about 5,000 spectators. The rows in the media and imma cavea were accessible from openings on the same level as the triangular form. Above the entrance corridors were placed the boxes for the guests of honor. The boxes, along with other work of the theatre, were installed in the Augustan age by Hulconius Rufus and his brother at their own expense. For this reason, Pompeius was reserved the honour of the seat usually assigned to the decurions.
Side of the gym of the gladiator, so we turn right, okay?
The little theatre was built around 80 BC by the Dwarviri, Quinctius Valgus and Marcus Porcius, the same who also commissioned the building of the city's amphitheatre. It was attached by a roof that gave it extremely good acoustics. The roof, which was probably a double-pitched one, rested on the outer wall enclosing the tiers. The semicircular cave, i.e. the space with the tiers for the audience, could hold about 1,300 spectators. The first part, the imma cave, is separated from the upper section by a railing decorated at the ends by winged lions' paws.
This theater was intended for 1,000 people. 1,000 people could enjoy a concert in there. It's so surprising because, as you can see, it is not that large. But during our walk, I'll show you these guys. They look like petrified, mummified people, but they are absolutely not. These are the plaster casts of the human bodies. I mean, the archaeologists made the molds of the people that died in the stuff. In a bit, I'll tell you which was the technique to make that, and you'll see how were very
The decurions, the members of the city council, sat in the first 4 rows. The common people would climb up to the upper tiers along the 4 semicircular steps on the sides at the bottom. The entrance to the corridor of the Media Cave is decorated by 2 kneeling statues made out of tufa, the so-called telemons, similar to those made of terracotta. The large colonnaded space behind the great theatre was a sort of foyer where the spectators from the 2 neighbouring theatres could walk about during intermissions or take refuge from the rain. The structure consists of a spacious open court with an arcade on all 4 sides and is surrounded by a series of small rooms set against the outer walls. The main entrance is in the corner towards the little theatre. The quadriporticus was built in the early 1st century BC. After the earthquake of 62 AD, the rooms under the porch were added. The gladiatorial weapons found here have suggested the hypothesis that it was used during the
When the fallacy, the so that you can see the wooden roof, the wooden fence, and the wooden beams. Everything, of course, is a reconstruction. There was no wood was
After the first 10, 12 hours dreaming about everything.
C'est bien. Oh, I do active. Because the chariots, they had exactly the perfect stones. The big stepping stones for the pedestrians, like Siva's had. To cross the street without getting feet wet in dirt. Because this town had
by something. You know, now at that point we have 88 of them everywhere. All the tissues here now was really big. They didn't have pizza, pasta, spaghetti, mozzarella. Nothing of that.
Talk about the gladiators.
Y cuando me gradué, cuando se me caga, y cuando se caga.
Está colaborando abierto.
Mucha gente, hay que esperar.
The large colonnaded space behind the Great Theatre was a sort of arena where the spectators from the two neighbouring theatres could walk about during intermissions or take refuge from the rain. The structure consists of a spacious open court with an arcade on all four sides, and is surrounded by a series of small rooms set against the outer walls. The main entrance is in the corner towards the Little Theatre. The quadriporticus was built in the early 1st century BC. After the earthquake of 62 AD, the rooms under the porch were added. The gladiatorial weapons found here have suggested the hypothesis that it was used during the last years of the city's life as gladiators' barracks.
Has been left as it is. Because for us today seems to be more interesting to see this with the famous building, you see the mosaic, with the fresco. But imagine here many beds, tables, lots of food, wine. They use bronze statues just to hold oil lamps. They used to give also to the most important guest the most beautiful slave. Enjoy your dinner.
Oh.
It was very. And here you see the only place in Pompeii where you see the original wood, like charcoal wood. Yeah. And like this, such a pretty piece of original wood you don't see anywhere else in Pompeii, but many places in Herculaneum, as I told you. In Herculaneum, sometimes you see the original wooden beams, the stairways, out of wood. That was the technique they used to apply the decoration in the ceiling, to easily apply the decoration, and not to load it so much. They just use ridge plank, a thin layer of plaster, some color, and like a tunnel. Yeah. It was easy. There was a library over there. A library over there. You see down here the key for the door. And now we go up to the second. That stable, as I told you, there were more than 37 stable for little donkeys. And here, the archaeologists found a skeleton of a horse and the metal part of the chariot which has been reconstructed. So the metal part of the chariot are original. Oh, the axle. Yeah. This was a garage. Oh, of course. Steve, you're right. Sitting at
House of the Ephebe. The house takes its name from the discovery of a bronze statue of an ephebe, youth, as a lamp bearer, now in the National Archaeological Museum in Naples. The statue is found wrapped in linen cloth and arranged together with other bronze statues of varying size in a series of rooms dating to the Augustan period. The statue was gilded after it became part of the family treasure. The structure of the house was the result of a series of purchases made over a period of time of 3 terraced houses occupying the area of the Insula block. This is why the house has a double entrance and a double atrium. The last owner may have been P. Cornelius Tagus, a wine merchant whose name appears in electoral inscriptions in the nearby area. The atrium leads to a large triclinium. The room is decorated in the 4th style on a white background with central paintings with mythological themes, such as Helen and Menelaus on the eastern side. There is also a floor in opus sectile with an emblema decorated with kaleidoscope rosettes and lotus flowers made of glass paste and exotic marble. On the western side of the external portico, there is a painted lorarium with a stuccoed niche and a 4th style fresco portraying Mars and Venus with Eros. The garden has a summer triclinium with a fountain in the middle placed on the southern end wall. The masonry couches have ornate fourth-style decoration on the base, with images inspired by Egyptian themes and Nilotic scenes with temples, cities, statues, and scenes of everyday life, which could be viewed in perspective in the water from the fountain.
Jeg tænker på, om der er mange flere turister om sommeren, eller om det ikke er så.
Thermopylae, from the Greek, means place where hot food is sold. The one we shall now visit is attributed to Vesuvius Placidus, the owner also of the adjoining house, on the basis of inscriptions painted on the facade. In this sort of snack bar, very characteristic and widespread in Pompeii, hot foods and beverages were kept in dolia, i.e. the large jars inserted into the counter. Here, one of these jars was probably used as the cash box, since a fairly large amount of money was found in it, perhaps a whole day's take.
Jeg tror også, det er godt, vi får en hviledag i morgen, mor. Jo. Altså det her, det... Altså jeg var på siden over at se...
Sometimes there were back rooms. Let's stop for a minute in front of the house of Julius Polybius, The building, which dates to the 2nd century BC, takes its name from Caius Julius Polybius.
House of the Orchard and Floral Cubicola. Exterior. In Pompeii, as in the whole of the Roman world, the fashion of Egypt spread together with the cult of Isis. The symbols of the Isiac cult, the motifs of the Nile landscapes, and the allusions to the power of the pharaoh embellished house furnishings from the 1st century AD onwards. Let's go and have a look at some examples. The entrance in front of us belongs to the so-called House of the Orchard and the Floral Cubicola. The name is obviously modern and refers to the frescoes found in 2 rooms, which are the reason we've come here too. In front of us is a very ancient house, probably built in the 2nd century BC and restructured several times, as shown by the paintings inside, which belong to different periods and styles. But let's go to our real destination. The room we are looking for is the second one on the left side of the atrium, i.e. of that porticoed courtyard with the pool in the center, which we always come across when entering Roman houses. It is a cubiculum, i.e. a bedchamber, usually a very small room. House of the Orchard and Floral Cubicola, cubiculum, the atrium. When we go in, we get the impression of entering a gazebo immersed in a flower-filled garden, many fruit trees and different types of bird flying among them. But if we look at the details of the fresco one by one, we begin to notice some elements we saw in the temple. First of all, a figure seated in a chair who looks like a pharaoh. He's accompanied by another wholly similar half-erased figure in front of him. The same figures are repeated. Again on the central wall, but at the top, we notice 2 panels with scenes of offerings to Egyptian gods. In the same position on the side walls are 2 images of the god Apis in his animal form of a bull, with the solar disk between his horns and the heart-shaped amulet around his neck.
Let's go into this house, which has an unusual ground plan. In fact, it is missing both the atrium, the room we usually find after the entrance, and the tablinus, which was the formal drawing room straight back from the entrance. Instead, here we are immediately in a garden, surrounded by a porch, the peristyle, onto which all the rooms in the house face. On the wall to the left of the entrance, we find the graffiti inscription which gave its name to the house. It is a drawing of a cargo ship with the word Europa written on the keel, on the lower left. The ship is pulling a lifeboat, visible on the right, tied to it with a rope. The name Europa
Up there, there's some stuff. Kevin is.
necropolis extends along the sides of the road immediately outside Porta Nocera, so called because the road led to the city of Nocera. All the cemeteries of Pompeii are located outside the city. Roman law established that cemeteries be outside the city walls, mainly for reasons of hygiene. The tombs were placed along the most heavily travelled roads so as to attract the attention of passers-by and ensure the perpetual memory of the deceased and his family. Thus, death offered a final occasion to distinguish oneself from others, and the tomb became the ultimate status symbol. Those in the necropolis of Porta Nocera go from the middle of the 1st century BC to the second half of the 1st century AD. In this period, the dead were usually cremated, and their ashes put in an urn that was then placed inside the tomb or buried in the ground around it. To begin our visit to the cemetery, I suggest you go to the intersection between the road of the tombs, which is the one parallel to the walls, and the road coming out of Porta Nocera. Put your audio guide on pause, and when you get there, turn around. Continuing along, we come to the largest construction in this sector, an excavated tomb, built of grey tufa, set inside an enclosure. The inscription on the precinct wall records the fact that it was built for herself and her family by Eumacia, a priestess of Venus. Here we are in front of one of the 7 gates that gave access to the ancient city of Pompeii. This is called the Nocera Gate because it is at the beginning of the road which leads to that city. Its construction dates back to the 4th century BC, even though it was restored over the course of time. The gate on the city side has a barrel-vaulted opening where the actual door was hung. Then
outside of the walls of the city. So this is why it's called intersection.
I think we make that a decision.
Yeah, this is.
the Emperor Augustus founded youth organizations called Collegia Juvenum, which united sports activities with military training. In this large sports area, built around 25 BC, various sports disciplines took place, like discus throwing, broad and high jump, wrestling, as well as military exercises like races with weapons or horse parades. This demonstrates that the sports arenas were used also for imperial propaganda purposes. The spacious green area, surrounded by porches on 3 sides, is enclosed by a wall which has 10 entrance doors. It has a swimming pool in the centre and was shaded by a double row of plane trees, whose roots have been reconstructed by plaster casts. In the center of the west porch, opposite the entrance on the amphitheater side, is a room that may have been used for emperor worship. On the walls of the porch remain some third-style decorations and graffiti of various sorts. Obscene phrases, bad language, comments on the spectacles offered by the gladiators, and even poems. There is a message left by a vain soldier named Floronius, who wrote that he was here, and that, I quote, "the women were unable to resist him, except for just a few, and they gave themselves to him." But there are also imprecations against candidates for city office. A curse on Caecilius! There are rent and lost and found notices, memories, and even caricatures. There are even a number of puzzles, a pastime that was already popular many centuries ago. If you would like to listen to more... This is one of the oldest and best preserved Roman amphitheatres, which were the structures destined to gladiatorial combat. It was built immediately after 80 BC at the expense of the Dwarvi, i.e. the most important city administrators, Quinctius Valgus and Marcus Porcius, the same ones who commissioned the building of the Little Theatre. The structure was erected in an outlying area of Pompeii, demolishing the existing buildings so as to take advantage of the embankment up against the city walls. The arena was dug out on a level about 6 meters below the ground level, and the earth that was removed was then used to create an artificial embankment on the western side of the amphitheatre. This embankment, reinforced by bulwarks and blind arches, became the front of the building, with the staircases that led to the Summa Cavea, or the highest section of the grandstands. Let's go through one of the two entrances on the main axis of the amphitheatre, and down into the arena. The cavea, or seating area, is divided into 3 sections or rings. The Imma cavea, or first row around the arena, was reserved for the most important citizens and held the Bisellia, which other spectators. The cavea was divided by ramps of stairs into 20 sectors, just like modern stadiums. The Imma and media cavea were reached through tunnels connected by a covered corridor running around the outer edge, from which spectators climbed to their seats through broad openings called vomitoria. Often a canopy, called a velarium, was spread to protect the audience from the sun. Along the main access of the arena are two doors. The parade of participants in the games entered through the triumphalis on the left. And on the opposite side, the libitinensis was used to carry away the lifeless or wounded bodies of gladiators or animals. This particular amphitheatre did not have underground areas. The animals in their cages were brought into the arena through these two doors. The people of Pompeii had a great passion for gladiatorial combats, which were held from February to July, but were organized also for special events or for the customary holidays. The show was generally organized in two parts. Hibertinus, in all probability, belonged to Octavius Quartius, as indicated by the seal ring found inside it. The original core of the house dates to the 3rd to 2nd century BC. It was modified after the 62 AD earthquake, when the splendid garden was laid out, following the taste of the times. On either side of the entrance portal are two shops connected with the house. Let's go inside. The ancient atrium of the Tuscanic type, i.e. with the roof supported only by beams, has been turned into a flower bed, and the impluvium transformed into a planter. The first room to the left of the atrium was set up as a workshop, perhaps for the work being done on the house at the moment of the eruption, while the third room on that same side gave access to the kitchen and latrine. Let's go into the upper garden. You can put your audio guide on pause until you get there. In the center of the garden, we see the small arcaded viridarium, or ornamental garden, with rooms opening off its sides.
Inspired by Oriental Hellenistic palaces, making this an exception out of all the city's residences. This starts with the entrance, which opens dramatically onto Via dell'Abbondanza with an artificial platform about 1.5 meters high, accessed via stairs at each end. Monumental entrance on Via dell'Abbondanza leads into the oldest baths in the city. Their name derives from Via Stabiana, which runs alongside the complex on the eastern side. The baths were built in the 2nd century BC, and the great work of restoration after the earthquake of 62 AD was very well along in the Vesuvius quantity. As mentioned, 124 buildings surrounded by a porch function as a sports area. In the center of the western side, on the left, is the open magnificent scene of figures of gods and athletes, painted stucco. Inside these rooms, the athletes were undressed and watched going into the pool. Actual baths are arranged on the opposite side in a series of rooms separated from each other. They run along the right.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Male sector, then the furnaces, the female sector, and finally the service area.
So let's see, because she pointed some stuff that we will not.
This large house is the result of the joining together of two separate residences in the 1st century BC. One with its entrance on Via Stabiana, the other on Vicolo del Banar. At the time of the eruption, decorations throughout the property were in the process
So
of
this
being
was the business activity run by two freedmen, ex-slaves. So they paid taxes, and they were Greek slaves working, on the behalf of those freedmen.
with current fashions. One of the parts already completed was the excavated, where guests banqueted in tranquility, arranged around fine marble slabs, surrounded by fine frescoes.
Lupa, Latin, means prostitute, and rather, it was the best organized some 25, and the only one which was created specifically for this purpose. The others were set up on the upper floor in private homes. The back floors of taverns and inns, or consisted of just one room opening off the street. This lupanari, renovated shortly before the eruption, has 10 rooms. 5 on the ground floor, with built-in beds made of masonry, over which a mattress was laid, and 5 larger ones on the upper floor, which was reached by an independent staircase. We'll go in the entrance at street number 18. Up high on the right, you may notice the image of Priapus, the god of fertility, with 2 phalluses, which he holds in his hand.
There, this is the lupanara. Oh, this is Lux. She is one of
Obcení obrázky, jak tam šuká. A pak každá ta komunita tam.
En zeker voor degene die kwamen natuurlijk zee uit van wat ik was in Harvard University. Kwamen allemaal
like the pay just for a working day or let's say for a job very nice. For 38.
19,000 Yeah. Sorry, it was a bit short.
Wow.
Here is the forum, the center of the city's political, administrative, religious, and economic life. If you stand with your back to the short south side and look north, you can see Vesuvius. All around the square, where chariots were forbidden to circulate, stood important public buildings. We shall visit them one by one. In the meantime, we can try to locate them. In front of you is the Temple of Jupiter, Pompeii's main temple. On the right, in succession, are the Comitium, Macchia building, the Sanctuary of the Public Layers, the Temple of Vespasian, and the Macellum, that is, the meat and fish market. On your left are the Forum Grandis, that was once the vegetable market, the Mensa Ponderaria, the office for checking weights and measures, and the Basilica. Behind you are the three city administration buildings. The square was first set up as a monumental space in the 2nd century BC and given its definitive arrangement in the 1st century AD. The white limestone paving, of which we can still see some slabs, replaced the older tufa pavement. Along the sides of the square, except the one where the Temple of Jupiter stands, this building, built probably as a place of worship by the Emperor Vespasian, was being renovated at the moment of the eruption. The temple was set on a high platform and had 4 columns in front of it. From where we are now, we can see the interior, where the statue of the emperor was placed. In front of the temple is a white marble altar. On the side This is the sanctuary of the protector deities of Pompeii. Perhaps it was built after the earthquake of 62 AD as public expiation for divine displeasure manifested by the earthquake that struck the city. At the moment of the eruption, it had not yet been finished. Let's try to imagine it. A building with complex architecture,
Okay.
Here we go.
Ow!
Don't hit people.
That was
Get away, no.
The Macellum was the meat and fish market. It dates to the 2nd century BC and was renovated numerous times. It appears as a courtyard with a porch on 3 sides and a row of shops on the right side. In the center are 12 bases arranged in a circle. These were the support for wooden poles, forming a circular structure, which may have had a conical roof. Fish was sold and cleaned here, as testified by the fish bones found in the drains underneath it. The back wall of the courtyard was divided as follows. The area on the right was used for selling meat and fish. the one on the left, for banquets in honor of the emperor, and in the center was a raised area of worship with a statue of the emperor. Now let's turn our attention to the area immediately to the left of the entrance. On the wall are the remains of the Florence-style frescoes, which decorated the courtyard interior. Architecture of fantastic design separates panels containing
underneath was a wood. He wanted to know what was in the wood. He filled the liquid plaster from
pictures of bread and fish remind us of the building's
purpose. Inside of the void, left by the decomposed material,
are two showcases, the plaster casts
and solidified. Once solidified became part, he excavated everything, and what came out is the mold, the shape of what was underneath. It's clear that the plaster went and replaced only what decomposed. But there are still skeletons inside, there are still the bones inside, there is a skull, and this gentleman is trying to not inhale the poison gases, died in seated position. So this is the last moment, an expression of the face of the victim. How many people died, how many survived? We don't know, no news about that. So we don't know how many people died. Probably the estimated number is 10% of the population, because they had the chance to run. Eruption lasted 48 hours. There was a port. People had psychological elsewhere, so they could definitely, if they understood the time, they could find. Who died probably? Because the poor who was attached, who belonged to the owner and wasn't free, so he couldn't run away. This is the reason why probably the poorest, unfortunately, died, but we don't know precisely. So this is our way out. However, those artifacts, you see there are some guards that we saw in the house of the member. They don't are like open areas showing the minor importance, materials, like parts or parts of the
who died during the eruption in 79 AD. If you would like to know more about the casts, press 108 and play. For information about the fourth style in painting, press 114 and play.
The forum baths were built up in 8 BC. They were divided into 2 sectors, one for men and one for women. We shall visit the men's section. We go in and along a narrow hallway, after passing an arcaded courtyard on our left. Once the sports area, we shall stop in the first room we come to. Press pause until you get there, and then play. We thus come to the apoditerium, the ancient dressing room. Here, bathers would leave their clothes on wooden shelves, of which all that is left is the holes in the wall. Actually, those who could afford it would bring their servants along to look after their personal belongings. They would then await their turn on masonry benches along the wall. Now, look into the circular room called the frigidarium, which was the chamber for cold baths. Do you see it? There is a central pool surrounded by steps on which bathers could also sit. The remains of the painted decoration are still visible all around the room. In the band dividing the wall and the dome are shown running cupids. Now, from the dressing room, we'll go into the next room, which is the tepidarium. I suggest you press pause until you get there. This was the warm room where bathers paused between their hot and cold baths. On the walls are niches separated by male figures made of terracotta called telemons, holding up the cornice of the barrel vault. The niches were used for storing the ointments and objects used for bathing. The stucco decoration on the vault concerns the restoration made necessary by the earthquake of '62, and the original colors are almost completely gone. The tepidarium was heated by a large bronze brazier that we can see at the end of the room. It is decorated with cow's head, a motif that we also find on the benches. This alludes to the name of the dome, one vacula. Vaca is Latin for cow. Now let's go into the next room, the calidarium, which was the chamber reserved for hot baths. To the right of the entrance is the pool for bathing, and on the left, a large marble basin and a cold water fountain. The inscription on the edge, in bronze letters, recalls the two magistrates who had it built, Cneus Melisius Aper and Marcus Deus Rufus. Here the heating system is a more modern one than the braziers used in the tepidarium. The hot air produced by nearby furnaces was circulated under the raised floor, which rested on short brick columns called suspensure. Go over to the large pool on the floor toward the left. You will see a grate through which you can...
Thermopolium, from the Greek, means place where hot food is sold. Pompeii had a good 89 of these ancient snack bars where hot foods and beverages were served. These were kept in the dolia, i.e. the large jars sunk into the counter. The sales counter was usually faced with marble slabs or mosaics, or painted, and had a small hearth at one end for heating beverages or soups for the customers. Diners did not stay in the thermopolium for very long. The food was taken home, eaten outside, or sometimes in back rooms where they could sit down. Here are two counters with dolia set down in them, one on the left and one on the right. Next to the counter on the left, behind the pillar, is a phallic symbol to ward off the evil eye. If you would like more information on food and dining in Pompeii, press 122 and play. The name of this house was inspired by the scene depicted on the mosaic floor of the tablinus. It shows a group of actors rehearsing with the director. The original is now in the archaeological museum. This house belonged to the Vetti, rich freed men, i.e. freed slaves, who became merchants. The house was renovated when the Vetti bought it around the middle of the 1st century AD. and then restored after the earthquake of 62 AD. Let's go into the entrance vestibule. Painted on the walls are, on the left, a scene of cockfighting, and, on the right, a sheep with the attributes of the god Mercury, the money bag, and the caduceus, i.e., a staff with two intertwined snakes. Mercury was in fact the protector of merchants. Next to the right door jamb, notice the fresco of Priapus, god of fertility, characterized by a large phallus, which was considered a symbol of good luck and protection against the evil eye. After passing through the vestibule, we come into the atrium. Here we can see the remains of two wooden safes, the nails and ornaments made of bronze and iron, and the masonry bases. The consuvium, i.e. the hole in the roof to allow rainwater to come in, is embellished with terracotta gutters in the shape of a lion's head. The marble facing of the influvium in the centre of the atrium is the result of modern restoration. Now let's observe the cubiculum to the left of the entrance. Here, the painted frieze shows a variety of edible fish. The back wall offers a rare example of ancient restoration. The central panel, in fact, appears to have been preserved, attached with long nails along the edge of the break between the original and the later plaster. The wall on the right depicts the myth of Leander, who swam the Hellespont to reach his beloved hero. Leander, swimming at night, was guided to the opposite bank by the light of a lamp lit by Hero. But a gust of wind blew out the flame, and Leander was overwhelmed by a storm. The next morning, Hero, finding the lifeless body of her lover, took her own life next to him. On the left wall is Ariadne being awakened by a cupid, with her hand over her mouth in a gesture of dismay, as she discovers that she has been abandoned on Naxos by Theseus. Immediately to the right, we come into the Ecus. On the entrance wall on the left is portrayed Cyparissus, a young hunter and friend of Apollo, who accidentally killed.
And look at the 3D perspective. How come? Why? Again, it's a way to show. He's telling us that his house is much bigger.
Well, isn't that trompe-l'oeil?
See, yes, optical illusion, trompe-l'oeil. It's always an optical illusion, you know, and exists because they want to give us false ideas on films. Look at this. This is the craziest lady of Pompeii. Can I tell you the story? Or it could be too much? The crazy lady? She fell in love with a bull. Oh, no. See, she asked this guy to make for her a wooden cow. The lady plan was to go inside the wooden cow, at that point be ready for the bull.
Oh no.
Oh no. Yeah, I'm trying to use delicate words.
Yeah.
No, from their wedding, the Minotaur was born, half bull, half man. That's their story.
That's interesting.
Okay.
That's the myth, huh?
Yeah, the myth. Like, you know, Arianna, the lady, desperate, left by her lover. The only person who was very happy was Bacchus, the god of wine. Hey, no worries, I'm giving you 2 bottles of wine so that you can quickly forget that moment. And look at this blue color, made out of lapis lazuli. You know, the stone, yes. Very, very expensive. It was one of the most expensive colors. Can you see the Roman fleet, the boats? Let's say this room was a kind of more intimate dining room.
Wow.
But I'm showing you very soon the most important room of this house, which is here. geologic trees and something. Look at this, amazing garden. These people are authentic. Okay? Look at the
The god's favourite stand. As a result, he was changed by the god into a cypress tree. On the back wall is a scene showing Ariadne and Bacchus, who came to her aid on Naxos, where Theseus had abandoned her. On the left wall, where you can see a hole left by diggers centuries ago, in the upper section,
with this view. Yeah, look how big is the dining. I told you the most important room. You can think, oh, but they didn't have television. No, look, you're wrong, because this is their television. A guest who came here had to stay 10 minutes here enjoying this animation. Little cupids collecting flowers, making parties. Can you see how much animation there is? This can be considered the television of 2000 years ago. But can you see these details? You see this little bird? Look at this. The grasshopper, can you see that? What's the need to add details on other details? On an already beautiful wall, that's art. But this room, I told you, was the dining room. And you know that. A dining room, when I say dining room, I do not mean chairs and tables. But there is one.
The name of this house derives from the cupids engraved on gold plates, now in the Archaeological Museum of Naples, which decorated a room in the peristyle. Once through the entrance vestibule, on the sides of which are 2 cubicula for servants, we come into the atrium, with its central impluvium and tablinus in the back. Passing on the left, we come into the peristyle, the real fulcrum of the house. Immediately on the left of the peristyle is a living room. The painted walls are in the 3rd style. On the right, we see Achilles in his tent between Briseis and Patroclus. On the left is Thetis, Achilles' mother, visiting the forge of the god Hephaestus to acquire new weapons for her son. In the background is the chief of the Argonauts, Jason, presenting himself to the king of Colchis, Peleus, before fleeing with Medea. The flower beds in the garden at one time held small sculptures and marble reliefs. Continuing to the left, we see the Sacellum, devoted to the divine Egyptian triad of Harpocrates, Isis, and Serapis, with the god Anubi, with a head of a dog next to them on the right. At the end of the arcade is a cubiculum, perhaps used exclusively by women, decorated with images of the seasons and looking onto a garden. This room is matched by another on the right, whose walls are frescoed with scenes of love. Venus fishing, Leda with the swan, Actaeon spying on Diana. Between the 2 cubicula is the triclinium, the dining room. Go back along the arcade and down 2 steps. You will come to a living room and 3 long and narrow service rooms, of which the middle one is the latrine. Next you come to the Sacellum, devoted to the cult of the traditional deities. Next to this is the cubiculum of the golden cupids, which flew above the large marriage bed. left of Porta Vesuvio is the Castellum Aquae, a large waterworks. The building is the outlet inside the city of a branch of the Serino aqueduct built by the Emperor Augustus. It is located in the highest point of Pompeii, so as to take advantage of the pressure of the falling water and distribute it into 3 main pipelines. 2 of which passed along Via di Stabia and through the Vicolo dei Vetti, and 1 destined to nourish a public fountain which no longer exists. Inside the waterworks, the water went through a complex process of collection and decantation. Then it was fed into 3 main pipelines, to which lead pipes called fist. This is the public office for the control of weights and measures, active from the end of the 2nd century BC. The measures were calibrated according to the local metric system of Oscan origin, which was later brought into line with the system set up by Augustus, as the inscription carved on the front of the counter recalls. The mensa, or counter, was formed of 2 limestone shelves, attached to the wall at a certain distance from each other. Now, only the lower one remains. Let's stop in the enclosure of the oldest place of worship in Pompeii. The Temple of Apollo, in fact, dates to the first half of the 6th century BC, even if its current appearance is the work of the questor Oppius Campanus, who in the 2nd century BC promoted the construction of a new temple with the money collected from offerings to God. After the earthquake of 62 AD, it was restored. But at the moment of the eruption, work was still in course. It is enclosed by a wall, with a porch on all 4 sides. Statues of gods stood in front of the courtyard columns. 2 have been preserved. On the right, the statue of Apollo pulling his bow. On the left, sanctuary dedicated to the goddess Venus was built around 80 BC. Venus was the patron goddess of Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a Roman general who conquered the city and made it a colony called Colonia Cornelia Veneria Pompeianorum. But Venus was also
Adesso